Hi, I'm Morel. You're just a waitress, my stepmother sneered, and with one flick of her hand told the staff to drag me out of her party. Guests laughed, cameras flashed, no one asked if I was okay, but as those doors opened, and my husband walked in, the one no one knew I had. That room? It froze. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been humiliated by family in front of strangers? Because what happened after changed everything, and they'll never forget who they tried to erase. I pulled up to the estate a few minutes before 6. The sun hadn't quite set, but the long shadows spilling across the gravel made everything feel colder than it should have been for springtime in Georgia. I sat in the car for a moment, my fingers still wrapped around the steering wheel, breathing slowly. I hadn't wanted to come, but Valora's words had echoed in my voicemail like a riddle I couldn't ignore. You're welcome to help, Morel. It's a big night. Someone with your attention to detail would be so useful. Useful. That's what I'd always been to her. Never a daughter, never even a proper stepdaughter. Just a convenience she could plug into her events when it suited her. I stepped out and smoothed down my black dress. Simple, sleeveless, tea-length. Not glamorous, but clean. Respectable. I'd even pinned on the little lily brooch one of the staffers had handed me at the gate. I knew what it signaled, volunteer helper, but I let it sit there on my chest anyway. Inside, the estate was already buzzing, tinkling laughter, clinking glasses, the gentle shuffle of shoes on polished wood. The air was thick with perfume and white lies. I hovered by the floral arrangement at the entry table. One of the vases was turned sideways. I straightened it without thinking, like muscle memory from years of tidying up other people's messes. A couple passed me, an older woman with a pearls for breakfast kind of aura and her date, who looked like he hadn't smiled since the Bush administration. She gave me a polite nod. Not warm, not cruel, just dismissive. That was the tone of the evening. I knew how I looked in their eyes. Unremarkable. The help. The girl from a forgotten diner in East Macon. I found a corner near the ballroom entrance, hoping to blend into the wallpaper. I sipped from a flute of soda water, careful not to make eye contact with anyone I might regret speaking to, and then I heard her. Wait, why is she here? Valora's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the music like glass. I turned. She was standing near the grand staircase, in a satin lavender gown, one hand on her hip, the other wrapped around a champagne coupe. Guests were beginning to glance over. She's not on the list, Valora continued. Is she even allowed inside, or is this some mistake from catering? I blinked. 1 beat. 2. No one moved. The pianist faltered. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was tightening around my own silence. A few whispers started up behind me. That's Valora's stepdaughter, isn't it? No way. I thought she married someone. What's his name? Never shows up. She's just a waitress. That's what Valora always says. That word. Waitress. Like it was a scar I should be ashamed of. Valora's lips curled upward. Not a smile. A warning. Take her out, she said, motioning to one of the young staffers in a white shirt and black vest. The poor boy hesitated, glancing between Valora and me like he'd just been asked to carry a live grenade. Ma'am, he stammered, walking up to me with a clipboard. I just need to confirm if you're— I know exactly who I am, I said quietly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I just straightened my back and took a step away from the wall. People were watching now. 6 of them, maybe more. I could feel their curiosity, some amused, some uncomfortable. A woman to my left actually pulled out her phone. And then the ballroom doors opened behind me. Footsteps. Slow. Steady. Unhurried. The kind that don't need to rush because the room bends around them. I turned just as my husband entered. Logan was still in his suit from the board meeting, deep navy, no tie, shirt collar open just enough to make the women glance twice. His eyes locked onto mine, then swept the room. His pace never changed. He walked up to me, leaned down, and pressed a kiss to my hand. "Did I miss something, darling?" he asked, as casually as someone asking about the weather. A hush fell over the room. Valora froze. The boy with the clipboard backed away slowly, his eyes wide. Someone near the staircase coughed, loud, awkward, theatrical. Logan straightened and turned to Valora. His voice was calm, cold. "Why exactly were you trying to have my wife removed?" There was a beat of silence, so thick you could slice through it with a dull knife. Derek hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. His words landed with surgical precision, slicing through the velvet air of the ballroom and hitting Valora squarely between her pride and her performance. She blinked, lips parting slightly before curling into something that might have passed for a laugh, if not for the edge of desperation glinting in her eyes. "Oh, goodness," she said, waving a manicured hand with forced breeziness. "Morel, darling, I didn't even recognize you with that pin. Thought you were helping the staff with setup. What a funny mix-up." She laughed again, a short, high note that bounced off the chandeliers and fell flat on the marble floor. No one joined in. I didn't say a word. I just let her twist. Derek stepped slightly closer to me, his hand brushing the small of my back, steady and warm. The crowd hadn't moved. They were watching, processing, judging. "Morel," he said, turning to me with genuine warmth, "you okay?" I gave a small nod, just enough for him, not enough for her. Then he looked up and addressed the crowd, his voice calm, controlled, just loud enough to carry. "For those we haven't met yet," he said, "I'm Derek Barron, and this remarkable woman beside me is my wife, Morel Barron." There it was. You could hear the shift in the room, the gasp someone tried to muffle, the sharp inhale near the orchestra's edge. Valora's smile strained, flickered, and then returned with tighter lips. "And," Derek continued, "she's also co-owner of the DB Foundation, the very organization this gala is supporting tonight." He didn't need to say more. He didn't need to say that the floral arrangements, the donor lists, the catered spread, all of it, was partly paid for with our funds. The funds Valora never bothered asking about, just assumed flowed in like magic from anonymous benefactors and tax write-offs. The murmur began at the back, by the bar. Then it spread, soft, rolling whispers like a tide Valora couldn't hold back. "Oh my God, that's his wife? I thought she was like extended family or something. She's the one who redesigned the scholarship program last year, remember? That's the waitress she yelled at?" Valora was still standing there, smiling, but her eyes were darting. A woman in a red cocktail dress gently moved a few steps away from her. A man Valora had been chatting with minutes earlier now stood with arms crossed, silent, observing. Derek didn't press. He simply nodded at the guests and turned back toward the far end of the ballroom, leading me with him. And just like that, the power balance tilted. I could feel it. Valora followed, heels clicking sharply behind us. She touched my arm lightly and leaned in, her voice low and pinched. "You could have told me," she hissed. "You made me look like a fool." I turned, expression still neutral. "You did that on your own," I said softly. I saw her eyes flicker. She wasn't used to me having teeth. She'd spent years believing I was soft enough to bite and never bleed. We moved through the room, slow and deliberate. A few guests stopped Derek, shaking his hand. Some looked at me with new eyes, the kind of curiosity that felt both gratifying and exhausting. Valora scurried up beside us again, her tone now a touch more performative. "Well now," she said with a brittle smile, "let me introduce you to some of our top donors. They'd love to meet the woman behind the magic." I didn't answer. I just followed Derek's lead, watching her try to reclaim her spotlight, only to find it had already moved. She guided us toward a group near the donor wall, her voice faltering slightly as she tried to mask the stiffness in her movements. "Everyone," she called out, "this is Morel. She's married to Derek Barron. They, co-own the foundation." It was all she could get out. Derek took over smoothly. "Yes, and we're grateful for your support tonight. The new funding stream will expand our Georgia mentorship programs statewide. And there it was again. Respect, attention. But not for her. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. My silence held more weight than any speech I could have made. I caught eyes with a woman near the back, someone from the Atlanta Ledger. She didn't blink, just scribbled something on her notepad. That was going to sting later. The rest of the evening blurred into a slow unspooling of passive-aggressive micro-movements. Valora's smiles turned waxy. Her jokes didn't land. People turned toward me for input. And when Derek stepped aside to take a brief phone call, a donor quietly asked for my card. It was near the end of the night when a waiter brought over 2 glasses of sparkling water. "On the house," he said, glancing at me with a warm, knowing look. "Sorry for earlier. Some folks don't know how to treat people." I nodded. And just like that, the dignity returned. Not in a loud way, not in a way Valora could even protest. It simply shifted. Later, as the crowd began to thin and the music softened, I stood near the back veranda watching the city lights. Derek had stepped out to speak with his COO. I was alone for just a moment. That's when I felt her presence again. Valora. She stood beside me, arms crossed tight under her wrap, lips pressed thin. "Was this your little plan?" she asked, low and sharp. "To show me up?" I didn't look at her, just watch the wind play with the treetops. "You invited me?" I said. "You knew what I meant." I let a beat pass. "You always made it clear," I said quietly, "who belonged at your table and who didn't." She let out a soft scoff, turning halfway toward me. "You've always had a flair for dramatics. All that struggle, that waitress act. What, you wanted applause for surviving?" I turned to her then. "No," I said evenly. "I wanted space to build something of my own, and now that I have, you don't get to rewrite the story." Her mouth opened, then shut. I walked away before she could say more. Inside, the photographer had begun packing up. Guests were exchanging final hugs and handshakes. One of the board chairs clapped me lightly on the shoulder and said, "You should be proud, Mrs. Barron. This was a turning point." I gave a small smile. He had no idea how right he was. As Derek returned to my side, we began heading toward the exit. But just before we stepped outside, a hand grabbed my arm, firm and sharp. I turned. It was her, my stepsister, eyes blazing, voice low but venomous. "You think this is over?" she whispered. The air outside the ballroom was sharp and quiet, broken only by the clack of heels on concrete and the distant echo of valet bells. The warmth of the gala faded behind me as the cool night swept in, laced with the faint scent of exhaust and winter-blooming jasmine from the landscaping. I didn't see her coming. A hand gripped my arm. Firm. Familiar. Unwelcome. "You think this is over?" Romy hissed, her breath sharp with nerves and something bitterer. I turned to face her. Same sharp jawline as her mother, but younger, angrier. Her eyes burned like they'd been holding this in for years. "Why didn't you just disappear?" she spat, "like Mom said you would." I didn't flinch. I'd had years to build that muscle. She stepped closer, her sequined clutch swinging like a threat. "You know you were the mistake, right? Dad's oops moment. That's what they always called you." I said nothing. "You were never supposed to come back. You were the shadow we all had to ignore, and now here you are, pretending you belong?" I looked away briefly, toward the curve of the moonlight against the parked cars, just long enough to steady the ache her words brought up. Not because they were new, but because they weren't. "You don't get it," she said, folding her arms. "Mom tried to protect the family name. She made the calls. I heard her. I was 16 when she met with that lawyer. They were going to cut you out of the will, quietly." My silence remained, because I remembered. I was 18 then. Home from my shift at the diner, shoes soaked through from a leaking walk-in fridge. I'd paused in the hallway just outside Valora's study, drawn by the unusual calm in her voice. "If we move it before she's of age, it's easier. She's not emotionally fit to manage anything. Family instability. Use that, get her name off. I left the next morning with a backpack and $58. No goodbye, no fight, just walked out of the house and never turned back. Or so I thought. You're only back because you married your way in, Romy sneered now, dragging me back to the present. That's not power, that's survival. I met her eyes. I built my life, I said, voice steady. I didn't borrow it. She blinked, once, like she wasn't expecting a reply so calm. Sure, she said with a short, cruel laugh. Whatever story helps you sleep. But I didn't need to argue. Not with her, not anymore. Footsteps behind me, measured, confident. I didn't have to look to know it was Derek. He didn't ask what was going on, didn't need to. He simply walked up, pressed the car unlock, and opened the passenger door for me. His hand rested lightly at my lower back, a gesture that said everything without him saying a word. Romy's gaze flicked between us, and for a split second her face shifted, like she realized she wasn't the only one playing a long game anymore. I got into the car without turning back. As Derek rounded to the driver's side, I glanced once more at Romy. She stood there beneath the parking garage lights, tall, proud, trembling. I used to think she was just Valora's echo. But no. She was sharper, colder. She didn't have her mother's grace, but she had her mother's ruthlessness, just distilled, like vinegar in a crystal bottle. The engine hummed softly as Derek pulled us out of the lot. He didn't ask what she'd said. He just reached for my hand and squeezed it once, gently. We drove in silence, past the rows of elegant homes, the wind nudging bare branches against one another like quiet applause. The gala was over, but its aftertaste lingered. They still saw me as disposable, a name they once tried to erase, a girl who grew up folding other people's napkins and walking on eggshells in her own home. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I turned toward the window, watching my reflection blur against the passing trees, and whispered almost to myself, "It's time I show them I'm not." I woke up to the sound of the coffee machine sputtering. My body was still tense from the night before, and my mind, well, it hadn't really shut off at all. Derek had stayed quiet the whole ride home. No speeches, no lectures. He just drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting close enough to mine that if I'd wanted to reach out, I could've. I didn't. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed silence more than comfort. Now, sunlight filtered through the blinds of my small apartment, throwing pale stripes across the floor. I padded over to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just bitter clarity. Derek's message had come in just after 8 a.m. "You're going to want to hear this. Press play when you're ready." I sat down on the edge of my bed and plugged in my earbuds, heart already racing. Then I hit play. The audio clicked on with the faint rustling of movement. Footsteps on hardwood, glasses clinking. Then Valora's voice, sharp and syrupy. "Thank you all for coming this morning. I thought it best to have this discussion without distractions." Distractions. That was me. She continued, her tone clipped. "We need to start thinking about legacy. This isn't just about assets, it's about protecting the family name. And frankly, Morel's choices don't align with that." A pause. "She's a waitress. She married above her station, but that doesn't mean she belongs at the table." I gripped my mug tighter. The heat didn't burn anymore. Then Romy's voice chimed in, light, smug. "It's simple. We ask her to sign. Say it's for tax simplification or probate streamlining, whatever sounds official. She won't dig. She never does." There was a man's voice next, calm, measured. Probably the lawyer, probably someone who knew better but didn't care. "Once she signs this, she waives all claim to the estate. That includes the 2015 trust, any amendments thereafter, and any future designations. Even if misrepresentations were made, accidental or otherwise, her signature finalizes it." Silence, a heavy one. Then Valora again. "It's not personal, it's what has to be done." "Not personal. That was the phrase that did it. I paused the recording. I sat still for a long minute, letting the words settle like dust in a room you hadn't walked into for years. This wasn't just pettiness. This wasn't the snide remarks or the pointed holiday invites that always got lost. This was removal, erasure, deliberate and strategic. My breath was steady, but my fingers were trembling. I reached over to my nightstand and pulled out the slim folder Derek had given me weeks ago, the one marked Family Trust, 2015 Amendment. He'd said it was worth holding on to. I hadn't looked closely until now. I spread the papers across the kitchen table, smoothing the pages with my palms. At the bottom of the amendment, in faded blue ink, was a signature that wasn't mine, but close enough that Valora must have hoped no one would question it. I opened my laptop and dialed up Naomi, my attorney from years ago when I had to handle some paperwork after my mother passed. She still picked up like we'd spoken just yesterday. "Naomi," I said, skipping pleasantries. "Quick question. Can you see who paid for the edits on the 2015 trust document tied to my father's estate?" There was a pause. "I can look into that, yes. Is there something I should know?" "If my name was removed without consent..." She inhaled sharply. "Then someone's in trouble," she finished. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. "I'll forward the files now. And Naomi?" "Yes?" "Keep it quiet." After I hung up, I picked up a red pen from the junk drawer and leaned over the amendment copy. I circled the signature, drew arrows, and in the margin, I wrote 6 simple words: "You almost got away with it." Then I sat back, stared at the page for a long beat, and smiled. Not from joy. From understanding. This wasn't a family trying to distance itself from an embarrassment. This was a family trying to reclaim what they thought they lost when I walked out at 18. They thought I wouldn't fight because I didn't scream. They thought I was gone for good because I didn't come back bitter. But they forgot one thing. I watched. I listened. I learned. And now I was documenting everything. By noon, Naomi had already messaged back. The amendment edits were paid through a private family fund attached to Valora's personal account. There was a brief note included: reallocation for asset clarity. Asset clarity, that's what I'd been reduced to. By 3, Derek came by with takeout and 2 sets of printed brunch invitations, one from Valora and one from Romy, both addressed to Derek. I laughed softly as I handed the invitation back to him. "So they want my signature?" He raised an eyebrow. "Looks like they're planning to present it over mimosas." I tapped the table, then stood up. "Fine," I said. "Let's give them a show." He studied me for a second, reading my face like he always did when I was quiet. Then he smiled, small but proud. "You sure?" I looked back at the table, at the stack of papers, at the coffee now gone cold. "Oh, I'm sure." They wanted my silence. They wanted my absence. They wanted my signature. Instead, I'd give them something else. I didn't sleep much the night before. I reread the letter I'd drafted at least 7 times, even though my attorney assured me it was airtight. Still, I kept seeing Valora's face in my mind, smirking, confident, untouchable. But this time, I'd come prepared. By 10:15 that morning, I was dressed and standing in front of the mirror. No heels, no lace, no desperate attempt to blend into their curated elegance. Just a navy blouse, slacks, a clean ponytail, and one thing they couldn't see: a steel spine. Derek pulled up right on time, his old Ford humming gently at the curb. "You sure you want to walk in alone?" he asked, his hand resting lightly on the steering wheel. "I need to," I told him, "but stay close, just in case she tries anything dramatic." He gave a nod, calm as ever. "You've got this, Morel." I walked the short path to Valora's door, the gravel crunching beneath my flats. The house hadn't changed. White stone facade, oversized planters, a too-perfect lawn. But something in me had shifted. The house didn't intimidate me anymore. Inside, the brunch was already in full swing, crystal clinking, soft jazz murmuring from unseen speakers, and voices, too cheerful, too rehearsed. I scanned the room quickly, Romy with a mimosa, chatting up a hedge fund friend. Uncle Brad and Aunt Luann hovering near the shrimp cocktail, Valora, in pale lavender silk, sitting like a queen at the far end of the table. Her smile didn't reach her eyes when she saw me. "Oh," she said, tilting her head. "You decided to show up." I stepped forward and met her gaze. "I brought something for you," I said, handing her a neatly sealed envelope. "Just a little reading material." She took it with that same tight smile, like she was humoring a child. But as her fingers slid under the flap and unfolded the papers inside, I saw the shift, subtle, but unmistakable. Her mouth pressed into a line. She glanced over the top of the page at me, then began reading aloud. "To whom it may concern," she read, her voice still smooth. "This document serves as formal notice that I, Morel Ellison, contest any and all amendments made to the Ellison estate succession without my knowledge or consent." The air tightened. Even the music seemed to fade. She kept reading, slower now. "A request has been filed for full discovery of all original estate trust edits, including payment sources and beneficiary changes dating back to 2015. Romy blinked. "Wait. What is this?" Valora didn't answer her. She folded the papers, once, twice, and laid them on the table like they were napkins she no longer wanted. "You don't know what you're doing," she said, low and sharp. "This is messy, Morel. This will make you look—" "I may just be a waitress," I cut in, keeping my voice even, "but I read everything now." A few chairs creaked as heads turned. Aunt Luann actually gasped. Derek, across the room, caught my eye and raised his glass just slightly. Someone near the window whispered, "What's going on?" Phones began appearing, quiet, almost polite, but they were recording. That part wasn't subtle. Valora's color changed, not dramatically, but enough. She leaned in, voice dropping. "We'll talk privately." "No need," I said, letting my hands rest on the back of the nearest chair. "I prefer transparency, don't you?" She opened her mouth again, then closed it. Her fingers twitched toward the envelope, but she didn't touch it. Romy looked between us, her face frozen somewhere between confusion and panic. I turned to the rest of the table. "This brunch was supposed to be about family, right?" I asked, not expecting an answer. "Well, this is me showing up for mine." I gave Valora a small nod, calm, respectful. Then I stepped back and found my seat. I didn't eat, didn't need to. The appetite in the room had already shifted. Valora didn't touch her food either. No one said much after that. By the time dessert came, half the guests had quietly excused themselves. Valora tried to regain composure, making a half-hearted comment about misunderstandings and legal overreactions. But her voice wavered. Her spoon clinked too loud in her teacup. Her napkin stayed clenched in her fist. I kept still, not smug, just steady. When I stood to leave, I looked at her one last time. "I know what you tried to do," I said gently, "and I know how long it took to plan." She didn't respond. But I saw her jaw tighten. She'd always thought I wouldn't fight back. She was wrong. And the eyes watching her now? She couldn't slam those shut. Valora slammed the envelope down, but she couldn't slam away the eyes now watching her. She stayed still for a beat too long, then forced a smile that barely covered the way her hand gripped the tablecloth. I left before she could regain control. Quietly. No one stopped me. That was Sunday. By Monday morning, the real unraveling had begun, though she didn't know how fast it would happen. I was home when it started. My place isn't much, just a 2-bedroom walk-up with linoleum that's seen better decades, but I keep it tidy. That morning, I'd just set a kettle on the stove when I imagined Valora pacing in her kitchen, phone in hand, cursing every ring that went unanswered, because I knew exactly who she was calling. Mr. Larrick, the man who'd handled Mallon family paperwork for over 30 years, the man who let her rewrite the narrative after Mom passed, the man who hadn't returned a single one of my emails until last week. I imagined her voice, tight with false calm. "Larrick? It's Valora. I need to talk about the brunch situation. Call me." No answer. I imagined her sending a second voicemail, her tone colder this time. "This isn't optional, call me back." Still nothing. By midday, she'd sent Romy, her ever-faithful errand dog, to drive by the office. I could picture her twisting her wedding ring back and forth while waiting for his update, but Romy would find only a locked door, blinds drawn, and a taped sign on the window. "By appointment only." He'd call her with that dull, nasal tone of his. "Place looks dead. Nobody's in. Maybe he's out of town?" That's when Valora would start pacing. Meanwhile, back in my apartment, I sat by the window, legs tucked under me, trying to read, though I'd scanned the same page 3 times without understanding a word. My phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the preview line made me sit up straighter. "Just wanted you to know, we got your affidavit, and thank you. It mattered." It was signed, Carrie, Larrick's assistant. I stared at the message for a full minute. No one had to send that. They could have acknowledged receipt with silence, but they didn't. That quiet little "thank you" carried more weight than it had any right to. I set the phone down, heart thudding, and glanced at my nightstand. The envelope was still there, the one I kept hidden since Mom passed. Her final letter. Not the draft Valora handed the lawyers. This one was handwritten and notarized. My mother's actual last words on paper, words Valora had done everything to bury. I'd kept it all these years like a secret prayer I wasn't sure I believed in. That afternoon I stepped outside to clear my head, walked 2 blocks to the corner cafe, ordered a chamomile tea I didn't need, and sat by the window with my phone flipped face down. I wasn't expecting anything else. But later that evening, as the sky softened from blue to gold, I picked it up and found a new email waiting. From Larrick, no subject, just a single line. "I no longer represent the Mallons. If you need to speak privately, I'm available Thursday." I reread it 3 times. He didn't say why. He didn't have to. This wasn't about siding with me. It was about not wanting his name tied to something that was about to crack wide open. I sank back on the couch, letting that truth settle in. Valora had built her power on silence, controlled conversations, closed doors, rewritten records. But now, the silence wasn't hers anymore. It wasn't protecting her. It was turning against her. At 7:42 p.m., I called Derek. He picked up after 2 rings. "Hey," he said softly, like he knew this wasn't small talk. "I didn't mean to get pulled into all this," I began. "But I think it's time I finish what they started." A pause, then let me help. Simple, no lecture, no hesitation. I sat there for a moment longer, phone still pressed to my ear, not needing to say more. The apartment was quiet around me, but it didn't feel empty anymore. And somewhere else in town, Valora was probably staring at her inbox, blinking at the name she never thought she'd see turn cold on her. I had just stepped out of the shower when I heard Valora's voice echo down the hall, sharp, clipped, barely holding itself together. I didn't need to see her to know her heels were stabbing the tile with every step. "They froze the trust fund," she snapped into her phone, pacing past the kitchen. "What do you mean you can't override it? You work for me." She didn't see me, or maybe she didn't care. Her hand clutched her phone so tightly, her knuckles had gone pale. Her other hand flew wildly as if trying to swat the entire conversation out of the air. I lingered by the doorway, towel still around my shoulders. She slammed a cabinet shut, then another. The coffee maker beeped weakly. Valora ignored it. I waited until she turned her back before stepping back to my room, letting the towel absorb the sudden chill that wasn't from water. By the time I sat down on the edge of my bed, I could hear her stomping back toward her office. Then silence. Until my phone buzzed. I wasn't sure why I checked. Maybe habit, maybe dread. But it wasn't from a friend or from work. It was an anonymous social post sent by my classmate, Rena. I tapped it open. At first, I didn't get it. A screen grab of an old gala invitation, Valora's name printed in gold script, but right next to it, a scan of a birth certificate, my birth certificate. There was no caption, just the word, "She knew." I didn't want to click through, but I did. And suddenly, It wasn't just my name. It was a whole thread, posted by someone claiming to be a former paralegal at the estate firm. They wrote, "Sometimes the law doesn't make mistakes. People do." This was never about inheritance. This was about silence. Scrolling down, there it was, a notarized affidavit from someone claiming they'd witnessed Valora signing paperwork alone for a house never legally transferred to her. My stomach clenched. I switched apps and saw it all again, now on Facebook. A screenshot of a comment under a local HOA group. Malin estate under question. Who actually owns what? I didn't want to say anything. But then, Valora barged in again. "Romy, were you on my iPad?" I looked up. No. Someone posted images from my gala invite list that was password protected. I blinked. "You think I leaked your guest list?" Valora's eyes narrowed. "I think I'm being targeted, and you're not helping by sitting around like some innocent spectator." That last word stung. Spectator. I stood. "Did you really sign for Grandma's house?" She froze. I repeated it, slower. "Without permission?" Her voice was so low I almost didn't hear it. "You think any of this would exist without me? Without my money? Without the hours I spent cleaning up after your mother? Planning her future? She didn't even know what she wanted half the time." "Doesn't mean you get to decide for her," I said quietly. Valora didn't respond. She walked out, slower this time. I stood there, the echo of her words still hanging in the air. Then I turned back to my phone. Another buzz. An email thread had started. Subject, "Malin family and HOA voting privileges under review." I read it twice. Then again. The board had begun a formal inquiry. The words "conflict of interest" and "pending review" danced through the lines. My eyes stopped at one sentence. "Effective immediately, Valora Malin is suspended from HOA board voting until review concludes." I didn't even have to say anything. Valora had read it too. That afternoon the house was unusually quiet. Even the dog didn't bark when the mail came. Around 5, I went to grab some tea. Valora sat alone on the couch, her phone face down. James was across the room, sipping his bourbon in that slow, methodical way he always did when something was simmering beneath the surface. She glanced up at him. "Well, say something." He didn't move. She tried again, louder this time. "You're just going to sit there while the world throws garbage at me?" James set his drink down. "They're not saying anything, Valora, and neither should I." He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just stood, grabbed his jacket from the armrest and left. She didn't follow. I stood behind the wall, watching her back, shoulders still stiff like she was holding herself together with thread. I almost felt bad. Almost. She turned slightly, as if she could feel me behind her. "You think you're so clean in all this?" I didn't answer. She grabbed the wine bottle on the counter with shaking hands, muttering something under her breath I couldn't catch. And while she poured herself another glass, she didn't notice what the mailman had left tucked under the stack of HOA flyers. I sat back against the kitchen chair, the wine bottle still cool in my hand. The silence in the house was heavy, like it knew something I didn't. I reached for the corkscrew when Romy's voice cut through. Valora?" Her tone didn't match the usual eye-roll sarcasm or defensive sharpness I'd grown used to. It was something softer, uneasy. I turned and found her standing by the hallway table, holding a thin envelope with a red certification stripe along the edge. "It's from Morel's attorney," she said. I let out a sharp breath through my nose. "Let me see that." Romy handed it over slowly, like she wasn't sure if it would burn her fingers. Or mine. The envelope opened without resistance. Inside, a single tri-fold letter and a flash drive. Nothing glossy, no courtroom drama, just cold, calculated truth. I scanned the first few lines. "Notice of legal dispute regarding unlawful transfer of property, Faircrest Avenue residence." My mouth went dry. Romy stood beside me, reading over my shoulder. "They're accusing me of fraud?" I muttered. There was more. Attached exhibits. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and opened the folder. A video began playing. A notary, maybe mid-40s, wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt and speaking with a dry voice. His name appeared on a little white card taped to the bottom of the screen. "My name is Henry Acker. I was contacted in late March to witness a property transfer. I was told the document had been pre-approved by the family. When I asked for confirmation, I was strongly encouraged to proceed without delay." The camera zoomed slightly. "In hindsight, I regret allowing myself to be pressured. I now understand the true owner, Morel Green, was unaware of the transfer." I slammed the laptop closed. "He's lying," I hissed. "He's just trying to protect himself. That coward signed it himself." Romy's voice was barely audible. "There's a note." "What?" She picked up the letter again and held out the second page. It was a scan of a handwritten note. I recognized the shaky cursive instantly. "Grandma, if anything happens to me, I want the Faircrest house to go to Morel. She's the one who stayed. Who cared? She's the only one who never asked me for a dime." Dated April 3rd, 3 weeks before she passed. My skin prickled. My hands curled tight, crinkling the page. "She can't prove intent," I snapped. "She can't—" Romy stepped back. "You sure about that?" I looked up. Her arms were crossed. She wasn't glaring, she just looked tired. "You forged Grandma's name, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "I did what had to be done for this family," I bit back. "Do you think we'd have survived the taxes, the debt, the board scrutiny without me cleaning that mess up?" Romy didn't answer. She turned, walked to the living room and sat, eyes fixed on the floor. I followed her, pacing, holding the letter like it might change if I just read it enough times. The clock read 7:12 p.m. That's when my phone buzzed. A notification, HOA monthly meeting, Zoom link live. I had nearly forgotten. James had set it up on the main desktop in the study earlier. I walked over, logged in, and waited as the attendee screen filled with familiar names, neighbors, board members, local residents I'd nodded to in passing for years. The chair began speaking. "Thank you all for joining. We'll begin tonight's agenda with a matter raised under community integrity." That was new. Before I could process it, a screen share popped up. At first, just one file, then 5, then 13, the notary video, the scanned note, the bank records, everything. My name in bold on at least 4 PDFs. Someone, anonymous, was uploading them one after another. There was no voice, no commentary, just evidence. Quiet and undeniable. The chair cleared his throat, visibly shaken. "We have reviewed the submitted documents. In light of what's been presented, the HOA has taken an emergency vote. Effective immediately, all Mallon family members are suspended from public leadership roles in this community. This includes budgetary oversight, social planning, and trustee communications." My jaw clenched. I reached for the mute button, only to realize I'd never unmuted to begin with. A voice spoke from the second screen. "Mr. Camden lived 2 houses down." He leaned forward, face filling the camera. "Shame. You always acted like you were better than the rest of us." Another neighbor unmuted. "Guess that $400 a plate gala money wasn't as clean as we thought." My fingers hovered above the keyboard. James walked in. He stood behind me, silent. "Say something," I whispered. But he just walked past me, picked up his glass of bourbon, and left the room. I stared at the screen for a long moment before slamming the laptop shut. When I turned, Romy was standing in the hallway. Her eyes weren't on me. They were on the suitcase she'd quietly set down near the door. We didn't speak. Not then. Not when she picked up her phone. Not when she disappeared into the guest room. I sat at the kitchen table again, poured the wine with shaking hands, and took a long sip. That's when I noticed it. A thick manila envelope on the floor, half tucked under the front door. Stamped again with the same red stripe. I hadn't seen it when Romy brought in the earlier one, and I hadn't heard it arrive. The morning air still held that faint chill, the kind that clings to your skin even after the sun starts to rise. I sat quietly on the folding chair just outside the house, my suitcase at my feet, the same one I'd packed last night with only what I needed: clothes, some legal files, a photograph of Grandma Rose. I wasn't looking at the house. I wasn't waiting for anything. I was just breathing. For the first time in a long while, my breath felt mine. Behind the blinds, I could sense movement. Someone was watching. But no one came out, not right away. The silence stretched, long and brittle, until the front door creaked open with a hesitant push. Romy stepped out, arms crossed over an oversized hoodie, barefoot on the cold concrete. Her hair was still unbrushed, and her eyes swollen. "You were never supposed to leave like this," she said, her voice cracking like the screen door behind her. I didn't answer. I didn't look at her. She walked down the steps slowly, like each one was a decision. I stayed up all night, trying to figure out when it all turned, when we stopped being on the same side. Still, I didn't speak. "He left me," she said next, like she needed me to know. "I woke up this morning and his stuff was gone, even the dog bed. He just left." Silence again. "I have nothing, Morel, nothing. No job, no savings, no one to call. Please, just talk to me." I turned to her then, not out of anger, not even pity, just to let her see me, really see me without all the noise between us. "You watched it happen," I said calmly. "And now it's done." Her lips trembled, but I didn't wait for her to reply. I stood, picked up my suitcase, and nodded toward the house. "That place?" I said softly. "Keep it. It cost me more than I'll ever say." And then I walked away. Behind me, I heard her sink to the steps, a quiet thump followed by a choked sob. But I didn't turn back, not out of cruelty, just clarity. The Uber driver helped me load my things without a word. I gave him the address to the new place. He asked no questions, and I liked that. The apartment was small, clean, just a one-bedroom in an older brick building tucked near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, no marble countertops, no crown molding, no manicured hedges, but it was mine. I let the suitcase rest by the door and walked to the window. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, touching the framed photo I'd already set out. Grandma Rose, sitting on her porch swing, hands folded in her lap like she always did when she was about to say something she meant. There were no photos of the Mallons, not one trace of that house, not one echo of the past I'd left behind. Later that day, I changed into something simple and walked 2 blocks down to the community center. It was a red brick building with creaky floors and volunteers who greeted you like you were already part of something. The women gathered in folding chairs around a long table. Some held notepads, others just cups of coffee. One had a toddler asleep in her lap. The air was filled with quiet determination. A woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses looked up at me kindly. "You knew?" she asked. I nodded. "First meeting." She smiled. "Welcome. What brings you here?" I took the empty chair beside her, folded my hands in my lap, and after a breath said, "Hi, I'm Morel, and I know what it's like to lose what was already yours." Heads around the table nodded, not out of politeness, but understanding. That day, I listened more than I spoke. Stories poured out about husbands who forged signatures, mothers-in-law who manipulated deeds, sisters who turned on each other for a sliver of land. Some cried, some just clenched their hands quietly. By the end, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not just grief, not just vindication, purpose. I didn't need the house to win. I didn't need them to beg. I just needed to finally speak and be heard. That night, I returned to my apartment. I brewed a pot of herbal tea, opened the window, and let the breeze carry in the hum of the neighborhood. Somewhere down the street, a kid was learning to play trumpet. Terrible notes, but full of hope. I placed the tea beside Grandma Rose's photo. "You were right," I whispered. "They never did see me coming. And maybe they never will. But I'm here, and that house, the one they stole? It's still there, but I don't need to be."